Hey everyone, and welcome to Almost Cancelled. I am Peter, and today I'm going to be talking about Utopia Season 1, Episode 6. It's called Respect Your Purpose. So, full spoilers for the episode, as always. I am back. I'm very sleep deprived today, but I am here to talk about Utopia. And I was excited to come back. I'd been a few days off. Bly Manor launched. I had to get the first episode of that before I could come back to this one. And I came back after the big cliffhanger of Arby and Jessica, and there being this kind of weird mutual understanding and whatever that moment was. So I think this episode is probably just a little bit better than the last couple. And surprisingly, I think that comes mainly from the Stearns plot. And it's not that the plot with the main characters is bad by any means, and not that it doesn't have some good moments, because it does. Some sweet moments in particular with Becky and Ian, but I kind of enjoyed the Stern stuff a bit more in this episode, and I think that's notable because I was kind of less into it in the last couple. I think basically they stretched two or one subplot's worth of plot over two subplot episodes, if that makes sense. Whereas the subplot in this episode with them, and arguably it's the main plot. I would say it's the main plot in this episode. Is the sort of the slow realization from Stearns that something is afoot, that something is wrong. From going to their house, obviously the dad doesn't want him to come in the house, but the daughter's defiant and lets him in anyway. And this is not a real house that they've been living in. It's brand new. There's nothing in the drawers. There's nothing on the walls. Everything is just completely, white and unfurnished, and nothing's happened. So, and he kind of notices this while he's there, like the one towel that's in the bathroom still get a price tag on it and other things, and he's noticing all these details. And I kind of appreciate that they're giving him the chance to realize that he's been tricked, because it makes him a bit more. It makes him a bit more easier to root for. Like I think, while it's not that I would say that he was unlikable and being fooled before and sort of falling for the trap and kind of saying the things that he's supposed to say on TV, and that's part of Christie's, the master plan and all this stuff. While I didn't dislike him for that, I think in terms of giving us a character that we want to root for, that we are, cheering for and want to see topple the bad guy and get one up on him because he's been taken advantage of so many times. It was actually, I think, really important to see him kind of start to at least be a little smart, not be completely fooled forever. And him noticing these details, and as soon as the charade started to have cracks in it, he starts to notice all these things in the house. And he's called away. Christie, upon hearing that Stearns is looking into things a little bit too much, he calls him out of the city to make sure he comes back home, cancels his meeting when he gets there. But unfortunately, one of the things that's sort of leading to all this is the defiant daughter, right? The daughter, the twin, who not only let Michael in the house, but then later on is like, craving media attention, wants to talk to the press, and it all obviously bubbles over when the dad commits suicide. We get this sequence of him buying stuff for the house so it looks full, and then killing himself. And I was actually questioning for myself why he did this before he died. There's, as far as I can see, two possibilities. One is that he intentionally filled the house with items so that, because he actually wanted in some way Michael to figure out the truth, and because obviously he's not as devoted to Christie and the home and all that stuff and the undoing. I think he's having questions at the end here. So either he's deliberately planting all this stuff in the house so that when the house is seen again, admittedly, would he know there's going to be a TV interview inside the house? I don't know. So maybe this one's a bit far-fetched. Alternatively, is that he is actually still devoted to the undoing, and he still does care about everything, and he realizes that this was an oversight, that this house should be filled with stuff to make it look like they've really been spending time here. But instead, but he still doesn't feel happy. He still wants all this to end. He still can't live with what he did to the other girl. He still can't live with what they're doing. But he is still in some way devoted, and therefore he's doing this for her and for the cause before he, checks out. And that seems fairly plausible as well. In fact, I really like the scene where he's on the phone to Christy and I almost said Dwight, and Stearns is with the girl, and I liked it when she was talking to him about her interest in ballet. It felt so scripted, and this actually comes up later on. Actually, when it comes to the fake identity for the dad, because like, oh, Stern's going to look into him now. The world is going to look into him because he's going to be this famous suicide because his daughter was the survivor who came back from the vaccine with the vaccine, and but I liked her delivery because before we even sort of raised those questions in the episode, it kind of I noticed. I think this is the thing that really stuck out to me here, and this is maybe less a performance thing and more of a script thing. But he kind of interrupts her and asks her about something else, and she kind of just railroads back onto talking about ballet to the point where it feels like she's so excited or she's like so determined to get through the script she's learned that she's not willing to deviate at a moment's notice. It bizarrely enough nowhere near as funny, of course, but it reminded me of a really funny scene in Firefly. You know, Firefly, of course, created by Joss Whedon, the person behind the hit television show Buffy the Vampire Slayer. But there's a scene in Firefly where Jane learns this medical jargon to trick their way into a fancy hospital, and they end up just being waved on in because the people at the desk just don't care. They're having a busy day. They don't want to ask questions. And Jane, because he's so proud that he's learned his little bit of jargon, he says it out loud anyway, and it's this great funny moment. And this kind of reminded me of that in a weird way, except without the setup. Because in that episode, like, I got the montage of them trying to learn this, so it was really funny when he said that anyway, because he kept getting it wrong before. Here, this was the opposite. Here, this was me not seeing any of the setup, me not seeing her learn anything, but I was just seeing the end result, and I was going, this feels off. This feels like she's been learning this and she's determined to stick to it no matter what. And I kind of appreciated that. It's a neat little trick in the writing. So that's, I thought it was good. Stars gets back home. He sees this interview on TV after the suicide, where the teen gets all made up and puts on a fancy dress and gets TV ready. But he immediately starts to notice that there's like cushions on the couch, there's photos on the wall, there's ornaments on the mantelpiece that weren't there when he was there a day earlier, and points out that it's kind of weird. Like, why would he go to a not hardware store, like it was a Bed Bath and Beyond, I think he said. Why would he go to a store like that the morning that he is thinking of committing suicide? Which I think that's what got me thinking that it was intentional almost, is that it was there to be kind of a sign. And I could kind of see that possibly. Again, I'm not sure if you would be able to predict that Michael was going to see any of this again, admittedly, so I can't really stick to that too much, but it was an idea. Maybe even a subconscious one, I don't know. There's maybe thoughts to be had. And I'll also give the episode credit because it then does a couple of smart things where, on one side, it makes a point of telling us here where Stern's wife points out that he has been in a mental institute before and that he may have to go back because he sounds crazy because he thinks it's a conspiracy, and he's starting to think that these people that he's finding online, like an old like colleague of the dad, and then like an old girlfriend, or she's on TV. And it's like they're all saying things from the same script, right? And we see the other side of this, which is the montage of Thomas with a team of people creating this fake identity with this fake history and all this stuff. So that's really neat because it then ties into something that pops up in another plot with the main group. But the other smart thing is, one of the things I complained about a couple of episodes ago was the really predictable ending with Christy and Arby. And I think here the ending was predictable, but it was intentionally predictable, and it's such a big difference because there's the moment where he's so convinced that he's figured this out, that this petting zoo that's in all these different cities are the same cities that all the virus is spreading and breaking out in, and that's what's being used to somehow spread it. And he's convinced, and the wife keeps trying to tell him that he's operating on 2 hours sleep, but she's really hammering it in, and she's been kind of against him like a lot of the time, especially this episode. And there's a moment, and I think this is a scripted moment, but also a good performance moment for the actress, because There's a moment where you can just see it in her eyes. She's not revealed her hand yet. She's not attacked him yet. She's not done anything yet. But there's a look in her eyes at a certain point when she realizes that she's lost the fight, that she's failed to keep the cover and keep him in bay, and that he's not going to like just turn off and go to sleep or do anything else. There's a moment where you can see that she's lost playing it this way, and she's going to have to switch gears, and she looks pissed about it. And it's just a little moment in the performance, and it's that second where if you haven't already maybe guessed where it's going, if you weren't predicting it, and I don't think I was. I think it was this moment. I saw the look in her face and went, "Oh, she's working for Christie. This is her purpose. Her purpose is to be the wife of him, so that she can keep him on a leash and sway him and send him in whatever direction he needs to be sent in." As they pointed out in the other plotline, he is the llama, the llama that Mr. Rabbit is using, the tool. Even though that was the correct interpretation, obviously the others, Jessica and Wilson, are convinced that he himself is Mr. Rabbit because he's the one on TV making these speeches, and because he's in the photo from the mental asylum that was burned down. He was there at the same time as Jessica's father, and presumably left, I imagine, just before that happened. But so it's interesting to see these stories come together. Even right early on, you see the other characters are watching him on TV and they see this. And then later on we have the actual theories of he is Mr. Rabbit, and it's actually it's not Jessica, sorry, it's Becky who says no, he's the llama. Becky and Ian are being the sensible ones, and maybe they've got clear heads because they finally had sex, as quick as it might have been. But it was actually a really sweet scene. It wasn't awkward. It wasn't like silly. Like if I had described this scene to you where they have sex and he finishes within 20 seconds or whatever it is, it might sound like it's going to be a really awkward, uncomfortable scene where it's kind of embarrassing or whatever. And it isn't. It actually just reinforces how much chemistry they have and how much they like each other, because they just kind of start giggling with each other that that's how it went. And then they clearly have sex again because Wilson walks in on them. And it's delightfully funny, especially when because he's trying to tell him about a breakthrough. And then he storms back in and says, this is why she told us no effing. So, funny. Wilson can be quite funny when he has the chance. And that leads to these other theories that we're obviously getting into. And there's actually a very stylized sequence in this episode where they're talking about Jessica's past and trying to remember home, and these children being worked on, herself being hurt and seemingly experimented on. And we get this animation that's in the style of the comic book, which is very distinct because we've not really done that much as of yet. The only exception, of course, is the very start of the show kind of had an intro like this that kind of set things up. And that was kind of the dystopia stuff. This was kind of giving us some of the Utopia side. So that was cool. It was nice to sort of break up the visual style a little bit with that. The bigger things though with the main group in this episode I'd have to imagine we'd be talking about two things. One is the stuff with Alice and her needing to be consoled, of course, because her mother just got killed. Jessica not really giving a shit, to the point where, beyond just not giving a shit, she almost shoots her because she's insisting she's going home. She's like, no, I want to go home, my bed, and she's going to storm out, and Jessica pulls the gun, and everyone kind of has to stand up and get in her face and try to tell her to stop, and it's Grant himself who stands in front of the gun and says, please no. Which makes Grant super likable, actually. It gives him a moment of just, selflessness. Heroism. Even if it's just because he likes Alice, and it kind of it shows you that in that sweet moment later when the rest of the note that he ripped off because he was too embarrassed to keep it in, but it said P.S. you're cool. Nice little character building moments. Grant was a character who was on his own for a while for the first few episodes, so him getting these beats now is really great because the main trio I've always really liked. I've liked them since episode 1, and that leads to the other big thing. Obviously, other than Alice cutting off her braid, but is that for a second I was like, are they going to kill another character? Is Becky just dead? Is that why her and Ian had so much happiness this episode? Is because they're going to rip out our hearts and feed them to us? Luckily, they were playing a major bluff here, which I'm glad because I didn't want Becky to die, But they hold it for a long time. They hold it like she stops moving and her eyes stop moving. She's not blinking. She's not breathing. She lies there dead for quite some time. And it's, for a moment I was like, nah, I don't buy it. She's got to come back. But it went so long that I eventually I was like, wait, are they? Are they doing this? No. But she does eventually get back up, and she gets back up with a funnel literally in her neck. That was Jessica did try to save her. To her credit, she tried to save her. Admittedly, her bedside manner when she thinks she's dead and just says, well, that's that then, and just goes back to looking at Utopia and is like, yeah, we have to go get this Michael. Michael's Mr. Rabbit. We have to go get Mr. Rabbit. And then, of course, afterwards, when Becky does get back up, thankfully, they're all like, hey, Jessica, can we slow down a little minute? Becky just kind of came back from the dead, and she just walks over and passes her in the back, really condescendingly, and then gives her a scarf, of course, to stop the blood. Because, of course, when Becky pulls out her funnel, there's a nice squirt of blood, and it's a wound that's now open, and one might even say gaping. Which actually now has two examples. We're 2 for 2 now on characters having serious wounds that very much need medical attention that seemingly aren't going to get any. Wilson's eye has been in need of attention since episode 2, and he's made some, DIY eye patches, sure. He has done that. He's achieved that. But I would imagine that he, perhaps, making sure it doesn't get infected, little things like that would go a long way. I'm starting to get anxiety from all these wounds that could lead to serious things down the line. Obviously, Becky having a hole in her throat doesn't necessarily help with the disease long term, but it certainly helped in this case. It would have been super bold just to kill her like that, randomly almost, towards the end of this episode, but it also would have felt like, hey, we did the surprise death back in episode 2. Can we please not? Can we please keep a character that I really like around still? Thank you. That'd be wonderful. Thank you, show. I don't want to be that miserable. Because this show, despite the dark stuff that it does, has a fun kind of veneer to it. There's a fun kind of tone over the top of it, which I appreciate. It makes it a little bit more than just misery, world-ending conspiracies. There is a heart because of the characters and because of some of the humor that it has. Now, a scene that we have to talk about, it doesn't really have a full plot per se, but Arby does come back to Christie, and he's upset because he throws a rock at the window very loudly. And when he kind of implies, he doesn't even really deny what he did. He just comes in and says that Utopia's with Jessica Hyde. I found her, but it's with her. Thomas starts beating the shit out of him with the rock, or he starts slapping him in the face, and he's about to hit him with the rock, and Christie says, "No, stop it, go to your room," which is let's obviously point out that he's saying go to your room to a fully grown man, which kind of goes into the weird qualities of this home and all these children being raised for their purpose, and how we find out here that Arby was denied love because Arby, his purpose was to be kind of, unloving, I suppose, for lack of a better word. He's supposed to be a bit of a sociopath. He's supposed to be able to go and do these nasty, horrible, horrific things that no one realistically, most people can't bring themselves to do. So their plan with him was to condition him to that point. But unfortunately, he started to kind of have some empathy in some ways. Can he be redeemed for all the things he's done? Yeah, probably not. But he has been conditioned to do it since he's a child, so he has more of a reason to maybe be given some leeway than other people would be in his situation. But there's a couple of things we find out here. We find out he's called Arby, which, up until now, the credits list it as, ARBY, and that's how I've been thinking it as I say it. It turns out that name is kind of a mean joke, because Christie couldn't remember his real name if he even had one. So RB stands for Raisin Boy. And, it's this, he's this brutally honest with him. But it's like, no, you're going to fall in line. You'll be forgiven for this once. But you have to, you don't want to not have a purpose. You don't want to not have a family or a home or a place in this world, do you? And the scene ends kind of more or less like that, with some dark ambiguity. But it oddly leaves me rooting for Arby. Not so much that I want to see Arby succeed, because he's done a lot of dark things, but just root for him in the sense that he can stand up and maybe rebel back against Christie, against Mr. Rabbit. Which, speaking of rabbits, don't think I didn't notice that the teenage girl's slippers were rabbits. They were bunnies. Very notable. And we still haven't quite found the. Actually, no. I was going to say we still haven't quite seen where all those rabbits were going at the end of the last episode. But presumably, if the whole petting zoo thing is true, then they just went to the petting zoos where the new virus locations were. That actually makes sense. Okay, yeah, okay. I figured that out live on air. Go me. But seriously, it's a solid episode. I had a good time with it, and it's maybe not quite up to the pacing of those first three again. I said that about the last couple, but I do think this is the strongest out of this second batch of three, if that makes sense. So we have two more left in this season. I'm curious how it's going to go. I do suspect there's going to be a cliffhanger. I'm pretty sure I'm pretty sure I heard, is the sentence that I'm trying to go with, that it ends with some sort of cliffhanger, which isn't super shocking. Amazon does that with a lot of the shows. I will say I'm a little concerned that it might just not get renewed, not because, well, unless it's already been renewed, which is possible. Amazon shows sometimes get renewed super early. I don't think it has. Okay, so I'm a little bit worried that it might not get renewed just because it deals with pandemics and viruses, and the world that we're in 2020 might mean that they think that it's not worth continuing. Because, presumably when they greenlit this, when they wrote it, when they shot it, they didn't know what 2020 was bringing, at least for most of that. So I'm a little worried that now in a 2020, pandemic world, that maybe they'll just sort of say it's not worth it, even if it's doing fairly well, even if people like it, even if we like it. Maybe they just don't bother, and that would be a shame. Now, admittedly, I've not finished the season yet. Maybe the end of the season will piss me off so much that I won't want any more anyway. But at least right now, I would want more. I would want them to keep going with this. So we'll see. We'll see how I feel about the ending. But that's episode 6. So hopefully enjoy my rambles and my thoughts on how some of these moments were handled. I've had another just little stylistic visual point I wanted to mention is the scene early on when we first see Stearns, and he's going to see the girl, but she's already left. But they're literally taking down all the tents in this quarantine zone as he's going, and it's almost like a piece of like choreography, just how intricate, as the camera's going past all these tents, and they're all just sort of coming down one by one with groups of people taking them down. It has a real rhythm to it, and a real kind of like his world has just been pulled away. It really feels like, he's been on a stage, on a set, and someone's just like lifting all the curtains to reveal the real world. And that's literally happening around him. In fact, at the end of that very scene, he goes into the tent where she was, and the tent literally comes away and comes down, and it reveals the outside world as he's standing there. And he takes off the mask. So it's a very visual representation of what he's going to go through this episode. And that was really good. I want to mention that. Alright, so please hit the like button. Liking is super important on YouTube, and it helps keep all the content coming. As does, of course, commenting, subscribing, ringing the bell for notifications, all those things. You can support us with some monies over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV for as little as $1 per month, and it helps keep everything going. More shows, more Patreon exclusive stuff, and everything. So go have a look. Otherwise, though, that is me. So thank you once again for watching or listening. I always appreciate it. Keep watching TV, guys. Have you got any vanilla?